high level opinion fest about your take on breathing in general.
Sure.
The technique you teach, and then how it differs from the undoing work.
Yeah.
Because the breathing's different, obviously.
Uh-huh.
And also in our sphere online, it's a big fad isn't the right word, but talking about those breathing and
you're cutting out a bit then. Sorry.
Okay now?
Yeah, it's better. Yeah.
So basically, in our sphere online, all the health guys, everyone's big on
health
nose breathing versus mouth breathing.
Yeah, makes sense.
And here we have with the undoing work, it's breathing through the mouth. And obviously this goes back to Reich. So I have some ideas about why this is and things, obviously. But you would know more about it because you're the breathing guy. And it would be interesting just to compare all these different things. So the kind of standard breathing opinions we get online are kind of guys.
Yeah.
The Christian Wyatt's undoing work on the other hand, and on the third hand, the technique that you teach and how it differs, how they interact, and why they have different methods regarding how you should breathe.
Sure.
Because breathing's not one of my strong parts. I did touch on it in the course.
And you do it clearly. That's why you're still.
I've been doing it. I've been doing it on and off for a while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes with bigger gaps in between sometimes. But I've been. So it's not like it's not. I do have techniques and exercises for it. They're part of the more general posture work, but it's not really something I've mastered, so I haven't taught much of it. And I put a little bit in the course, so you'll have seen a little bit in the course, but it's more just a sort of side issue I put in there.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear your take on all this, and then see where we go with that.
Yeah. Well, maybe we can start with the Reich nose versus mouth thing. I think it's fairly straightforward. So I know, for example, in Reichian work, particularly where you're looking at tension in the muscles and various other processes in the body like that, hyperventilation is fairly critical. So if you mouth breathe, you hyperventilate much more effectively than if you breathe through the nose. It's something that is causative to hyperventilation. So I think that, at least in the Reichian work, in the energetic breathing pose, it makes sense because you're breathing through the mouth, you're inducing hyperventilation. And probably most of the breathing techniques that I've come across, at least stuff like Wim Hof, other people that breathe through the mouth, they're all basically geared at inducing hyperventilation for various reasons. So I think that's one reason. The other reason with the Reichian work in particular, and this is probably something that became apparent to me maybe a bit later on, particularly when I started looking at breathing in general as a general thing, is that breathing through the mouth in the way that they prescribe. Actually, it reminds me because, as you know, I've been going through this Hyatt material that we're editing on behalf of Original Falcon Press. And there was one session in there with a guy in there. I forget his name. Doesn't really matter. And he was told to go and get into the energetic pose on the mattress in the middle of the conference room. And it was interesting looking at him breathing because he was sitting there and making quite a loud, grasping sound. So he would breathe in, he'd be like, and then he'd go, like this, like he's tightening his throat around the breath. And I think that's the crux of the issue. That's what you probably shouldn't do, as far as I'm aware, is in that specific way of breathing for that exercise where you're understanding tension, where it is and how to release it, is that you don't want to grasp onto breath with muscles in your nostrils or your throat. And part of the reason that you have your mouth open and you're trusting gravity, you're allowing, or you're trying to allow the breathing reflex to occur without the ancillary muscles that it actually doesn't require. So, for example, with the throat in particular, if you sit there, and I think most people can do this, they may sit there and if you take a breath in and really take note of what's going on with your, the muscles around your esophagus or your throat, all that area. And if you're cognizant of what's going on, you'll probably notice that you tend to, every time you inhale, you tend to grasp onto the breath, like you're holding onto it. And you employ lots of different muscles in the area to do this. Everyone's a little bit different, of course. So with the undoing work, you want to try and do the opposite thing. So you actually want to stop doing that when you breathe in. And the best way to notice what you're doing is to breathe through the mouth. And when the breath reflex occurs and you breathe in, to try and not grasp at the incoming air or on the exhalation, on the outgoing air. It's actually quite difficult. So I don't know if you've noticed this as well, but you eventually get to the point where your throat ends up a bit more like a pipe and you're relaxed and the air just goes through without any noise, without any audible grasping or sound. And on the exhale, you can easily do the sound, which is, of course, a bit that I haven't spoken about, but I don't want to get too technical. So there's two things. I think it's the hyperventilation, and it's also the ability to undo the muscles in the throat and the larynx.
So it's so the mouth. So for anyone who hears about the undoing work and goes like, "What's all this mouth breathing about?" The reason for the mouth breathing, it's not saying this is how you should breathe. It's not the point of the work isn't to do it to practice breathing so you breathe the same way later. The point is it's a technique for getting you to hyperventilate, because there's various effects in your brain that is required for the undoing work. And then also so you become aware of the things you need to stop doing in your breathing, so then you can allow the breathing reflex to happen later. So it's more like a technique on the way rather than a here's how to breathe. So for anyone who's like confused by this, why you would be lying back.
And a very difficult technique. Very hard.
I mean, Christopher Hyatt says somewhere about a lot of people it takes a long time just to get this down. Or as Jack Willis mentions how, it could be a long time before somebody can get the breathing part correct.
Yeah.
Before they've even moved on to the other exercises.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening, the position that the person is in both the Hyatt's undoing work and also, I'm assuming, Reiki work in general, is you're lying on your back on a bed. You have your knees in the air. So your knees are up and your arms are by your side, and your head's just back lying on the bed. There's no pillow or anything under the head or anything like that. That's right. So I'm assuming that the position is designed in such a way to help with the two things that you just said, the hyperventilation and also the stopping the overuse of muscles that you don't need.
Yeah. And the sound is drawing attention to that area repetitively. So you're just consistently having to become aware of it. I think so. It's all a part of a process in which you're trying to particularly let go of tension in the throat region, particularly. But of course, it's quite a difficult reflex to master anyway, because you're thinking about the R sound, and there's a very specific way that you're meant to make the R sound. You're trying to breathe in without making an audible grasp, or that kind of indication that you're grasping onto the breath. So it should be silent. The R sound needs to be perfect. The timing needs to be right. But also you're meant to breathe in a very specific way, which is the way you actually should breathe, which is into the belly, into the upper chest. And then when you exhale from the belly and then the upper chest. So it's this cycle that's meant to follow a specific timing, quite a relatively slow timing. You've got all these different things to think about. So it's incredibly hard. I mean, even to this day, sometimes I have a lot of trouble with it. I don't know about you, but it's, there's been phases where I've done really well at it, but, in general, it's very difficult. It's not easy to master. All of those elements working.
Hyperventilation very fast.
Yeah.
So, which makes me think I'm doing something wrong rather than doing it very good.
No, it's what
obviously I used to do it a lot more when I was young. When I was younger, I did a lot more than I've done it recently. I've been working on other things. Oh, one thing I wanted to ask you about is the fact that there's nothing supporting the head, and so their head is kind of falling back on the bed. Like if somebody's lying sleeping flat on their back, they will have their pillow under their head. Most people. So the fact that it's like that, that's kind of creating a strain on the throat. But that's, for this technique, that's probably useful. That helps you then become more aware of the areas and more able to stop doing excess effort or tension that you in that area that you don't need.
Yeah, I'm a little bit undecided. So over the years, I've kind of moved from something a bit softer to something maybe harder, like a futon, maybe your typical futon that's quite thin and has quite a hard surface. And right. On the futon, I tend to use like a little, maybe 2-inch thick kind of pillow or platform under my head. I don't think you want it right back, according to my understanding of physiology. I don't think.
Okay, because that's not what I do now anyway. I've been experimenting with raising certain parts that are more.
Actually, I wanted to ask you about that, because I'm not sure that that's what you want from a structural point of view. I don't see the advantage in having your head hang right back necessarily. But
neither do I. I think it's creating other tensions that then you're going to have to deal with, and it makes breathing much harder because your position, you're putting things on. I use a very unusual model for where the head, neck, shoulders should be relative to one another. That's
noticed.
Well, I can't really explain it in audio. Yeah. I've been a lot of that's in the Principles Posture Training course, but most of the breathing stuff isn't, because I learned it after. Not after, but I was still working on it after. So there's a lot. If I was making the course now, there'd be a lot more breathing anatomy in it. And so basically, for the laying your head and neck fall back like that, like for standing posture. However, obviously, when you're standing, gravity is working breathing. And usually, when you're lying down, it's for sleeping, so you're releasing all the muscles anyway if you fall asleep, or you're lying down for other things. So it's a bit different from what you would necessarily do or require when you're about to use gravity to your advantage. Use gravity properly, position things, and use the spring system that I get people to work towards with the posture.
Well, one thing I can say is that, for example, in meditation pose and zazen, where you have to have a straight spine and sit relatively straight, not military, but relatively straight, is that the center of gravity is key in breathing. Center of gravity is critical. And we can get to that a bit later about maybe why that's the case. But if anyone wants to make progress in breath work properly, like proper, not just having a little session here or there, but if you really want to nail what's going on, finding the center of gravity is critical. And of course, that ties in with posture and how you sit and how easily you're able to find and maintain center of gravity. So I don't know.
And obviously your center of gravity standing, standing is one thing, and moving around and then lying down, you're just, I mean, the idea in the undoing work, like is to you're meant to just surrender your body to the gravity of the bed. Because, I mean, you have to remember, most people are hypertense, or maybe not most, but a lot of people are hypertense more or less everybody has got tensions in different places.
Most are hypertense. Most. I'll just confirm that.
Probably, yeah. And even people who are kind of easygoing and seem kind of more floppy and that, they're hypertense in different ways.
Yeah.
So it's almost like that's the first stage, is just to start getting rid of some of that tension.
Yeah.
So there are techniques where people just hammer the releasing the tension, getting rid of the tension. That creates its own problems later, and that's all you do, because you need to use tensions in certain ways.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, for most people, just releasing it everywhere in a kind of general sense will be beneficial, and it'll feel better to them. They'll be able to think clearer to a certain extent. One thing about the original Reiki stuff, the psychoanalyst guys were using probably like a sort of one of those firm couches, those old style couches that are pretty firm. So when they're lying on them, they're much firmer than a mattress bed would be, a modern mattress.
Yeah, far more.
So, like the typical mattress. So they're much firmer, and they have like kind of firm cushions and stuff, much more formal furniture.
Yeah.
So, and Reich is coming from the Freudian thing. So they'll have the person lying down on the couch, and the analyst is behind them and not touching them. And then Reich eventually moved to, manipulating them, touching them. It's a different context. Yeah. So using more firm stuff, like you said, is probably more correct even in the writing context, but I don't know. Yeah. That's a guess.
No, I think it is. And I think it is because you can't escape. You don't want to escape, right? Like you need to see or feel everything that's happening. And if the surface is too soft, you're gonna give yourself the chance to escape. So actually, I was going to mention what I'm doing at the moment is I'm unfortunate enough to have carpet, which I hate fucking carpet, but it is useful. So I've got quite a thick yoga mat, and so what I do is I put the yoga mat on carpet, and I have this little spongy kind of yoga block, like a kind of 1-inch kind of block rectangle thing, and I put that under my head, but the rest of my body is on this yoga mat on top of carpet, which is comparatively hard compared to most surfaces. Pardon me. And I found that to be the best surface I've used so far, because there's musculature in your back, and there's the way that your thoracic process interacts with the back and the neck, and all these various things that I don't think you really particularly notice when you're doing it on a very soft couch. That's my personal view. So I think that being on a relatively hard surface, so not like, tiles or something, but something relatively hard, really helps you notice parts of your body that you don't even notice lying on a couch, because you have your back and all this discomfort and stuff that's going on, and on a soft bed you're not gonna notice. It's half your body as far as I can tell. So yeah, I've changed my views. I've tried the technique on various surfaces. So I think a relatively hard, not brutally hard, but relatively hard surface with some neck support is good. That's my view.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah, that's what I've come to with it now, but that's not the standards.
It's not what they've described. No.
Yeah. Yes. So, anyone who's doing that stuff, probably you're better just doing it how you find it taught, and then adapting. We're adapting after years later, so it's a bit different for us. It doesn't mean we're right or wrong necessarily, but you shouldn't start adapting to your own standards necessarily. Like if you're learning something from somebody, you should just dive in and start changing things straight away.
No,
unless you have a very good reason and experience and a strong intuition of why you're doing that. In most cases, you don't know what you're doing to start. You don't know why the things that don't make sense often have a reason that you don't know in the beginning.
Yeah.
So err on the side of doing it how someone teaches it, I would say, but it doesn't mean you can't change things too. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, I think, the exercises are so difficult to start with that really the surface is somewhat inconsequential, at least for the first couple of years. I think you can get away with just doing what they say and then maybe reassessing after a while and once you get to understand what's going on. But yeah, I agree.
Yeah. We've talked about how we doing work a lot in the past, and then we were doing our own thing, integrating it or just doing other things. But you recently said on Twitter that you're starting it up again, or maybe it was on your newsletter. I don't remember.
You know,
so you're going to go through the whole radical undoing system again. So can you tell people listening why you've decided to do that and what your goals are, or what you're hoping to accomplish?
Sure. Well, for me, you know, having gone through the whole course in the past, you know, I got a lot of benefit from it. But you know, these days, with the things that I've learned since, particularly the tangents that I've gone on with my own work, I really just wanted to do it again, knowing the things that I know now, and try to integrate all these things together. So, for example, I'm running your course at the moment, and I'm not saying by any stretch I'm I'm advanced at all, but I'd like to think I'm making a little bit of progress. And then, of course, there's the things I understand about breathing physiology and various other things, and I wanted to try and run it all together, and to see what comes out at the other end. And I also focused on more tangible elements back in the day. So I was very much focused on, okay, I need to loosen myself up because I'm reactive in this situation or that situation, whatever it was. But you know, I'm just keen to push the limits a little bit. Perhaps maybe like what you did to start with. I'd like to just see how far I can take it and kind of like just take notes, just kind of see what happens, because I think that it's actually a bit of a green field. So I know people have been doing it for a long time, but it's very opaque. There's not a lot of information available on people that have really pushed it to the nth degree. And I'd like to think that integrating all different kinds of work, we can even innovate and make it something better, get rid of bits that aren't useful, implement things that are useful, and just try to build on what's been laid down. So that's my personal driver in all of this. It's not because I'm struggling in life. I don't feel pain. My life is really good. I live on the beach. You know, I have a good income. So I'm not worried about being something in the world and using it for that reason. It's more that I just want to try and synthesize something. I want to build on it. I want to try to synthesize something better or more useful, or a little bit more effective. Because we do know things that perhaps people didn't know back then that I think can be complementary to what the purpose of this is. So that's probably what I think. That's my main driver. So I'd like to push it further. I'd like to integrate things, but I'd like to make it more effective. And you know, we've been talking about this previously. Is almost like you could easily make a kind of not a one-stop shop, but you can unify all these apparently disparate things and try to create a body of work that contextualizes all these different things where they should be. And in a greater overarching sense, I think that's what I'm trying to do. And what better person to test it on than myself? I think that I can't imagine anyone's keen. Sorry, what's that?
guinea pig A. Buckminster Fuller called himself guinea pig B.
Yeah, totally. Guinea pig
so
A. Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
That was maybe a little bit rambling, but that's kind of what I'm.
No, that's great.
Going for.
No, that's great. I love it. So Hyatt himself says somewhere about how you should try different things and find the nugget and take the nugget and discard the rest and make it your own thing, And if you think about that his principle would apply to his work too. Not saying that you can necessarily just pick and mix little bits, because that's not how real things work. You still have to learn things properly. I'm speaking more at a kind of intermediate level here rather than beginner. And also, if you look at how people actually learn things in reality, very few people learn one thing solid from beginning to end without mixing it with anything else. In this kind of realm, hardly anyone does. Everything's taught as if they do. Here's this course, we should only do this. Step 1 to step 10. Or, it's as if this is your first thing in that field ever, and you're not going to automatically start integrating it with stuff you've already done or be already mixing up things. There's a cons of doing this, obviously. So in reality, somebody's going to be bringing with them things they already know related to it. They're going to be doing other things alongside it. They're going to have some other practice when they come to something like this. Highly unlikely this whatever I'm doing will be somebody's first thing. Possible, but unlikely, I bet. So it's just more in keeping with how people are actually learning things to have a mix of different techniques where you move in and out of different ones at different times and combine them in different ways, and come back to things, because some things you make a little bit of progress on, then you just kind of take a step back and you go off and do something else, and then you come back to later and you've lost some of the momentum, obviously, but you're still at a higher level than when you started, and you've done something else, and then you come back to it, and then you make more progress than you would have if you'd just stayed and done it in a linear way. So there's something to be said for in a non-linear approach, but it's really easy to just end up distracted and jumping from one thing to another. So if you have to have some kind of thing that keeps you focused, but usually that's just your own, either it's like you with your own sort of curiosity to see what, just adventurousness, well, let's see what happened and how do we put this together. Or you've got some specific problem you're trying to solve or something you're trying to create, then it's easy to sort of bring things in if everything's pulled towards this one aim, sort of like a central aim that pulls everything in, rather than just jumping around the next, chasing the next shiny toy, which is what people definitely do in the beginning. The later you kind of more, you can draw from things, but there has to be some kind of central thing that's about 70% of your work, I think, and then you can draw in other things with that. If you're just 20% of this, 20% of this, 20% of this, I think it's much harder, maybe impossible. And just your general interest, you're going to be more interested in doing some things at certain times. You're not going to do the work because you're not interested in it. You're just going to not do an hour a day on one thing, or even 20 minutes a day on one thing. You're just not going to if it doesn't fit your life or your interest at that time. So having some kind of thing where all these interrelated techniques,
but,
like a one-stop shop, but like where you just kind of flow it out,
integrate them,
and integrate them, and it's presented in that way. So it's like different people with different specialties. But you're not expected to choose one now, like that's the best. And it doesn't matter if they don't quite match each other. They don't need to align perfectly in concepts or techniques. They can contradict each other slightly because it's up to the person to make the synthesis. Because it'll be different for everybody anyway. It's like, some things work together, some things don't, more or less, but some individual people can make certain things work, others can't. So you just have to play with it, experiment, and make it your own kind of adventure rather than a chore. I have to get through the course A and I do that one, then I'll move on to course B, and then it's not really the way it works.
Humans, I think it's true to say, we're extremely tribal as well. So what I notice is people will latch on to a particular technique, which is okay, but there'll be like, I've seen all sorts of exotic things, like you'll have the Wim Hof people, and then you'll have like people who hold their breath, and then people who just nose breathe and they don't think they need to do anything else. And then you got body work people, lose all the tension. You got meditators. At the end of the day, human body is a human body. It's not it's not all these things. It is this whole process that is happening. And there's no particular reason why if something has a physiological effect, that it's bad or good, or if it's anything else, as long as it fits into the overarching goal or context that you've set, then everything can be useful, probably, as long as you can measure it and see what's happening. And some things are not useful. Some things
are useful.
Waste of time. Well,
yeah, but that is useful to do them, because then you know that thing is a waste of
for
time.
sure. There's only one way you're going to know, right? Yeah, exactly. Is by doing.
So, I mean, to an extent, as long as you cut your losses at the right time. If you keep doing, once you've figured it out, it's useless. If you keep doing it after that, then it truly is useless.
Yeah. Detrimental. Yeah. So in a way, I wanted to personally, I don't know about you, but I want to strip away the exoticism of the whole thing, the guruism, all these different things. And I want to bring a more, how would you describe it, like a more hardline approach to it. Try to properly emphasize and contextualize what different things are doing in the body, and what tensions you might need, what ones you don't need. For example, one of the most destructive things about radical undoing, at least in my work, is the is the abdominal muscles and letting go of tension, and letting go of tension in the diaphragm. A lot of people out there need to increase tension in the diaphragm, and that's absolutely critical to the breath reflex working correctly and functionally. And although it's meant to be a balance. It's got to be a balance between being able to have tension and being able to relax something. That's the key to a lot of this. So what I want to do is
the diaphragm.
Yeah. Go on.
I was just going to say that it's related to that about should you have less tension or more tension. So in the diaphragm, there's two ways to have the diaphragm central to your breathing. You could have it moving a lot and everything else reacting to it moving, or you could have it as the stable center point and things moving around from it, which is something I've been learning a little bit about, working on. Too hard to explain here, but audio obviously. But there's different ways of doing it, and that the approach of like moving around a lot it's one of those things that's really beneficial to somebody early on if they have a huge amount of tension. But again, if you keep doing it too much and if you just keep hammering this, use it always a hammer and you just keep going.
Yeah. And some people
cause other problems later.
Yeah, for sure. And some people have floppy bellies with no muscle tonus and no ability to control it. I think what gets lost in the Reich/undoing work is, it's not necessarily about tension, releasing tension. I think that it should also be about how you use the muscle. So it's in some cases that means you're going to be releasing tension. In some cases, you're going to be learning to recruit muscles that you've never used before, even thought about before. Maybe muscles you didn't even know you had. That's not really releasing tension. That's more just becoming conscious and using a muscle that you didn't know was there.
I categorize that where you just said it's under education.
Yeah.
You're learning. You didn't know how to do something. You were never taught how to do it. Well, you're using it in a way without realizing it kind of subconsciously. You're kind of actually re-educating yourself how to use part that you didn't even think about before. So it's actually under the umbrella of education. It's not even that mysterious or exotic about it. It's just, I didn't know that's what I meant to do. I just thought it would work by itself.
Yeah. And as you say, for me, what I've noticed probably through the years, it's more about balance, and it's about being able to use the muscles effectively and kind of independently of one another, but also in a chain effectively, while all the other functions in the body are occurring as well without recruiting weird bits of your body to breathe or whatever it is. So I see it increasingly more as an activity of balance, and becoming consciously aware of how you're using muscles, but also, as you say, there's specific places in the body where you want more tension probably than not. And the abdomen is a funny one because some people are chronically tense. Like I've had people that literally can't even slow their breathing down and can't even breathe into their gut. Whereas there's other people, if you touch the belly, it's just this floppy mess. And I don't mean just the fat, I mean the actual tonus of the abdominals is consistently extended, like everything is extended out. So, it all depends. Part of the challenge is trying to get the information to people in such a way where they can kind of assess themselves and then make a choice. Like, do I really need to release tension in my abdomen, or are there other ways that I should be looking at this? And I think probably most of the work that exists is mostly ineffective at asking that question. At least it's more like, just go away and do this. Where, as you say, sometimes maybe that's not the best thing by any stretch.
Might be part of the sort of downstream of the kind of guru model that you were talking about.
Yeah, totally.
It's like a guru, then the disciples learn it, and then a guru. So like everyone they just trust that's the way it should be because that's the context they've learned it. They think there's some kind of mysterious source of it, and sometimes it is, but it's like it's not. You can't just trust every single detail, and people know things now that didn't know then. There's like things that we know for a fact now that ancient Hindu teachers didn't know, and it's just stupid to pretend that you can't just go, okay, well that's not how that body part works now. You just know it isn't. That said, there's some of the modern ideas of how things work are wrong because it's broken into separated parts too much.
Yeah. They segment.
The older ideas have a more holistic idea, so holistic understanding. So again, these things are tricky. There's no like simple solution to it, and that's another reason why it's better to have different related versions and different related techniques.
Yeah,
that people move around themselves and figure out the truth for themselves because we don't know, and the whole internet culture, niche, God of their little niche.
Yeah,
this guru mentality is damaging because it's all set up in such a way that you have to be the expert who knows all the stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like factual, and there's lesson 1, lesson 2. I mean, I've done this in my course. It's not the way I would make it now. I would make it much more openly experimental. I mean, it is experimental the way I've done it, the way I learn it, but it is, I'm teaching is experimental, but we used to enter the guru with the information model, because that's the way it is. But there's other kind of more non-linear, self-directed kind of ways you can teach these things, which I think escape a lot of this, because then the person won't be like, oh, I must do it this way because he said this is how it works. It's more, here's what's working, I'm doing right now, right, like this is what happens for me, see what happens for you. If it does, do this. If it doesn't, do this. Try this. If not, and then the person can take it or leave it, and it's not like then they need to go online and tell this guy's a fraud. It's like you're all kind of exploding together. It's like, imagine if you're all in the you don't go like the guy. You all try different ways, different parts. We'll try this bit here. You don't start deciding that other people are because they went down a dead end and came back. It's part of the process.
Yeah.
If everybody's doing it with good intentions, like if they're not trying to fraud you and lie to you, and they won't be if they're not. People are less likely to do that if they're not being forced into this voodoo model that the internet is making even worse. Yeah. It's like the worst of the old ancient stuff.
Yeah, people are tribal
stuff.
Yeah,
and the worst of the modern stuff put together, and when it really doesn't, it could easily be the opposite of that because there's the whole way that you think the way the original hyperlinks in the internet work. Yeah. It's all felt so free. It all felt so free in the early days because you go here and then you don't know where you're going next. Then the next one. Yeah. Whereas now, since then, it's become a much more. The paths have been set out for you, and obviously there's a little art forcing you down a certain path while feeling like you explored there yourself, but actually you didn't.
Yeah.
So
it's also very. I just say quickly on that, it's very gimmicky today because people demand gimmick. And one element of gimmick is that you just want a pill to swallow because people are fucking lazy. They don't really want to do anything. They just want to be, here's one easy solution to all my problems. Like just stop eating vegetables or sun your fucking balls in the morning or whatever it is. It's just one, just one little gimmick that everyone follows, or just go to the gym, just do this, whatever it is. But, the human process, that we're a process in time and space, is extremely complex. And there's multiple different ways to look at things. And I really think that people would benefit from, as you say, being more open, being more experimental, less tribal, just try things out. If they work, they work. If they don't work, they don't work. There's also an element, I think, of people desperately, you want the wanting, you don't want the thing, right? So in a way, what I've noticed about online culture is people really desire to be loved. They desire to be recognized. They desire to be seen as the expert, to be the oracle, like I have all the answers. But when it comes to doing something, and I have some experience with this, I don't mean doing things, but noticing people like this doing things, they don't really do much. They can't continue to do even a simple thing for very long. So that tells me that's not what people are there for. They're not really there to be experimenters. They're there to be popular, to be liked, and to be loved, to have a vocabulary, to have their groups. They're all part of the same group. We do this style of thing and everyone else is a fucking retard and you're all stupid. That to them, the fight against the other, the posture tribe or the wrong Buddhists or whatever it is, that's more interesting to them than doing the thing. Because as you and I both know, doing the thing is quite monotonous a lot of the time. It's not sexy. No one can see you do it. And the results are only your own. You can't show off the results particularly. You can really just like, well, it worked for me, did this thing. So yeah, I'm generally disappointed with the internet culture, how it's turned out. But also I wrote an article the other week on distraction. Because I read this book by this guy called Adam Gazzaley, who went through the neuroscientific reasons of why people are distracted on the internet. And it's funny because the same reasons that the people are engaging in this behavior, so that they're talking about being the overman, about being superior, about being like doing all this stuff that the normies aren't doing, man. The normies aren't doing it. That, they're all just the victim of the same thing, of just effectively being distracted, of being engaged in novelty, which is a big thing that the human brain likes. I think the thing that we're talking about, the work that we're talking about, demands that you can't do that anymore. So in a way, working is antagonistic to internet culture in a very significant way. And so, yeah, I think that you need to be careful of people who are selling gimmicks. They're selling, just swallow this pill. They're selling, how to optimize your mornings, whatever it is, because there's no subtlety to these things. And so because of that, I just feel a lot of it is time wasting and a lot of it is not about the technique. So a big thing for me is being like, how do I use something that is inherently distracting to try and promote something that's non-distracting? Like, how do you do that? Is that even possible? I don't even think it's possible. I think it's pointless. So yeah, these are just some things I've been thinking about. I don't know how to reconcile or balance these things. But
yeah, I had the same thoughts when I
sorry.
When I was looking at the new Twitter subscriber options, like new upgrades you can get, and you can add more videos and more text and stuff like that. So I was saying, and you can have people subscribe to you for private tweets or whatever. And I was thinking, yeah, technically that would work for teaching conscious movement kind of lessons and things like that in a technical software sense. And then I thought, how if you're teaching someone to do conscious movement, which is literally spending time learning how not to react to your initial desires for movements in the context of Twitter, which is all about reacting to things that are happening around.
Pure
How
reactivity.
are you possibly going to learn that in there? Yeah.
Pure distraction. Pure distraction. Yeah. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah. I mean, and obviously everyone knows it's designed to distract. It's designed to keep you on it. Obviously, everyone knows this. And it's good at it. How could you possibly go from that to I'll quickly do a bit of being conscious and then I'll go back to the mindless distraction. It's not possible.
No.
For sales, probably pretty good for sales. Because
amazing.
All I would need to do, if I wanted to sell, I would just constantly remind people, what's your posture like right now, or some crap like that.
Yeah.
And then some gimmick.
Give yourself a statue profile picture.
Say sign up here, subscribe here for video now. And lots of people will buy it because they think I'll just quickly solve that and they'll go back to what I'm doing. But it's fundamentally dishonest.
It is. It is.
For me, that would be dishonest because I know that that's not going to do anything for them other than make me money. So either I decide consciously, well, I'm just going to do it for that, but to me, that's detrimental to the bigger picture. So in a kind of selfish way, that's detrimental to me.
Yeah.
Because it's not really being conscious, because part of the teaching it to people is it's the kind of brutal honesty.
Yeah.
So if you're not being brutally honest in the first place about this isn't going to work like this, then I'm kind of it's degrading work. So I have to degrade my wallet instead. Anyway, then it's the game is how do you, if you want to get somebody off the distracting platforms to do the real work on themselves, how do you convince them to do that? Where do you take them to? And at the end of the day, there's already just a very limited amount of people. Because as you say, most people are just on there to be distracted. That's what they're there for. The work they're saying. They're not there to do any kind of work on themselves.
No. I mean, I've given some pre-work to people who were interested. Not just people online, by the way. So people that I know. So I know that some people online got like a lot of benefit from it. Probably didn't continue with it. Some people in real life who have, I'd say, significant problems, who could have really got benefit from it, didn't even bother really touching it. And even with the instruments that I've got and showing people, so I'm like, look at this. This is happening in my body right now. And then I'll put it on them. I'll go, look, this is what's happening in your body right now. Even with that, they just can't bring themselves to do something. And this is just, I don't know how you change this part of the human being. Like they're just much more comfortable living in words and concepts and in their imaginations than even spending 20 minutes a day doing something. Because actually, for a lot of the course I'm putting out, that's all it takes is 20 to 25 minutes a day. Like most people spend more of their time scrolling their phone on the toilet. Like, and yet you have something here that literally changes their entire experience, and you can't manage compliance to make sure that it's being done. And I'm the same as you. I've grown really cynical on online ways of doing things. Other than maybe if they pay you money, then maybe you have a chance of making them do the thing. so it's this weird quirk. Like you can't help people. Like you can't, even if you give them something for free, give them all the evidence, you go, this is what it's going to do for you, they still will not do it. So as you say, that if you still want to just be honest, like I want to be honest, I don't want to rip people off either. I don't want to have some dumb solar head thing or whatever the fucking idiots do. I care about the work. I care about, in a general sense, where the work is going to take me, where it's going to take other people, what's going to be left behind afterwards, and where people take this. That's what I care about. But yeah, I find it just so hard online to try and project that message. So what I've done now is, I like the Nietzsche way of doing things, how he used language as a hammer. I think he said that once. And I've been using social media, probably fairly ineffectively, as a hammer, because I consider it kind of like, well, everyone else can sell you these fantasies. I'm going to just say something that's going to slap you in the face and wake you up. And I'm just hoping that maybe that way we can find people that are interested. But at this point, I don't know. I don't know what to do. I just think, I think that I don't like to use pills, pill terminology, but I am black pills probably on the species at large. And particularly, one of the reasons I came to Twitter is because I thought there was an energy there that could be utilized for something like this, but it's turned out not to be the case. So, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but yeah, these are big questions. I struggle with them. I part of what I'm putting in the course is going to be trying to use digital distractions in such a way that they can benefit someone, which is a green field of science at the moment. It's like, okay, well, knowing that everyone is going to be distracted, how do you then use the medium of distraction to try and induce a change?
Right.
And I think
everybody's
I think it's possible,
because they're like, and you have to use it against. You have to use because if we're both teaching things that are, you could like classify as taking conscious control of your physiology in some way. So most of you isn't conscious, obviously. We're not pretending that we're making all of it conscious. That's absurd, and why would you want to?
Yeah.
But you can't have more conscious control over things to change things than most people probably think, and you can have really big effects in ways that you can't imagine yet until you try this. But when you're starting to learn it, you need to. Most of you're going to have all these subconscious mechanisms and all these habits that are working, so you have to figure out a way to use them. They're working against you, but you can use them to your benefit if you're clever, and not pretend to yourself that you're going to just be mega disciplined and take total control of it all straight away, because it's not possible or even preferable, because you can change too quick and find yourself. So you need to, there's ways you can manage your own distraction. You can, reward yourself or set things up in such a way that it's hard for you not to do the work that you need to do. Like I have my day arranged where I'm doing one thing before and after different things, so that it's just natural for me to do that next. And that's part of the day. I'm lucky I could do this. So my kind of discipline like that is kind of, I've just set up structures that helps me be disciplined. So there's ways you can get people to do the work like that, where you teach it to them in such a way that they can fit it into their life and amongst their distractions. But you're swimming against the tide if you think you can get people in and out, like somewhere like Twitter, to do some kind of this work. It needs to be. YouTube, I think, is easier than
YouTube.
It's less,
way better.
It's way better because there's more of it because a lot of people are there for learning things anyway, so they're kind of in learning mode. Whereas Twitter, they're not in the mode and kind of reactive mode. Even if they're not actually tweeting, they're reacting to things emotionally constantly.
Yeah.
Less about learning, although people do that too. So I think, the platform matters a little bit, but still, it's the same kind of issue.
Yeah. You know, one of the main things I wanted to get out of all of this is to really just have a kind of an inner circle of practitioners. And I'm still hopeful we can at least achieve that. I mean, it's never going to be, we're never going to be Bill Gates, anything like that. It's not about making money for me. I just really want to put the work forward, and I'd like to find people that are willing to do that. But it's not easy. It's the power of exotic things is really, really something. Like, people will latch on to the most ridiculous things as long as it's exotic, it's new, it has novelty. They love it. They love it for 3 months, then they move on to the next thing, the next theory, the next set of words. And what's particularly contemptible about the esoteric circles, how they constantly do that, is it really, the whole purpose of the work is not to do that. It's to faithfully, in a disciplined way, move through in an analytic and intelligent fashion through a body of work. But I don't see anyone doing that. I just see this appeal to novelty and exoticism, and
related to that one, like you said earlier about people talking about things in public but not actually doing it in private. Is they are desperate to talk about the course they've just started and the thing they're just learning. They're like, it's like that's the thing. It's like they just paid the money and joined this thing so that they could have that little moment of glory. Followers. This is what they're doing now. So like it implants into people's mind, oh, he's done that course and he has that wisdom now. But really, they probably don't do it. It's probably a relationship between the amount people talk about it and the amount that they actually do it. Anyone who runs any kind of course knows that most people don't do the course anyway. This is normal. It's fine. It's just the way it is. Most courses I bought, I didn't. It's just the way it is. But there's always a handful of people who are really good and really into it, and that's their thing. And they're the most enjoyable people to deal with. They're the ones who are, you don't hear from them at all, and you suddenly get this really advanced question later. They've been working it hard and and you're really like shocked.
Yeah.
And who's this person? And because they only get in touch because they have a practical question. They're stuck. And their first instinct was to try things, not to write to you with their opinions about what to be and connect and stuff. Like one of the biggest traps learning anything is
asking,
oh, this is like this is like that. No, it's like the comments, but it's the comments of oh, this reminds me of this other thing. This is like this thing. Like that's a total trap. I mean, it might be like those things, but you're not actually learning the thing now. You've already it's like a different thing you're doing. This is gossip now. You're not learning. It's for more an intermediate person or an advanced person to decide how it connects to other things if you know the other things. And early on, if something is a real technique, they're being presented the concepts and the technique and the methods in a specific way. There's some things you need to learn first before later. You have no idea what you don't know in the beginning. You're not in a position to decide what it's like and what it's not like yet, because the person, and I know this for myself, I'll teach a simplified version of a concept that's technically wrong. For later it would be wrong, but it's the only way you can teach it in the beginning. For the person to understand it, because they need to have that tool now that then they can learn it, the more advanced version of it later. If I was to try and teach the advanced version later, they wouldn't get anywhere with it. So it's kind of, it's like you have to be kind of, what the word for that? It's kind of cunning, but not. It's cunning for the person's advantage rather than disadvantage.
Yeah,
it's tricky.
It is very tricky. It's kind of like breathing. properly, which is also actually tricky because people are full of it online, absolutely full of it. We can talk about breathing if you want. We can talk about what it is and what it isn't, how it probably should be done most of the time, because it's one of those weird things that everyone does it. People have done it for thousands of years, and at least in the West, everyone can't really do it at all. It's really bizarre. And it's so critical to everything. And there were cultures in the past that had a good grasp on it, not in a scientific way, obviously, but in an intuited way. They intuited what it was and what it wasn't. And we know this because there are several documents, old Chinese medical books, old Japanese medical books that I've read, which basically state cutting edge science in terms of physiological breathing science today, which to me is incredible. So, I think it kind of ties back to, much of what we're talking about is nothing new. Many cultures have looked at this stuff before. Many cultures have integrated it into the way that they did things. But breathing in particular is very. There's a lot of literature on it, and particularly in the East, they really went quite far with it. I'm not sure in the West. I've never come across documents that really talk about it in any great detail. But it would be interesting if anyone out there has any information on it. So I guess I'll just start in general. What I think should happen. So there's a lot of people online that talk about slow breathing. So breathing down how many breaths you make a minute, and that there's people tend to attack this in the same way. So the way is that if you slow down your breath, you put on the so-called vagal braking, or you're slowing down not slowing down, but you're shifting the emphasis of the nervous system to a parasympathetic state, which is beneficial. And this is absolutely the case. People breathe way too much per minute. So the average person breathes maybe 15 times, I think it is, last time I looked. 15 times per minute on average, which is basically 3 times more than you want to do in a relaxed state. You want to do about 5 to 6 breaths per minute. So there are accounts online that do talk about this. That's absolutely true. There's some big YouTube videos, people talk about it. Anyone that's done yoga or relaxation, different things, you would have no doubt heard something similar along similar lines. But it's more difficult than that. I think the devil is in the details, and how effective all the things that the breath does in your body, how effective those things are in their interrelated functions. That's a whole other level of detail. But we can talk about this if you want. So, for example, I guess the way I came to this personally was through Zazen or Zen meditation, sitting meditation. And I remember very clearly on a retreat one year, I was fairly uptight, I would say. I had a lot of stuff going on. I was still in that phase where I was wondering, what is this doing? What am I? I'm waiting for something here. I'm waiting for something to happen. And I think I went through a crisis, I think I call it, maybe a crisis would have been day 8 of the session. It was a 10-day Zen retreat. And it wasn't anything too painful, but I'm just like, what the fuck is this? I've been facing a fucking wall for 10 hours a day, sitting here waiting for something to happen. I must be missing something here. I must be missing something. And yeah, it was a little bit of a crisis. I was facing this crisis, facing a wall with a bunch of people around me. I was sweating. I distinctly remember the state. My breath was really quite shallow. And yeah, it was an emotional kerfuffle. And I remember very distinctly that passing over. And all of a sudden, I remember this little, I don't know how you describe it, like a little sphere of awareness forming in my lower abdomen, below my belly button. And it progressively grew bigger, and it was inflating extremely rhythmically, with no input on my behalf. I was not controlling the breathing at all. Of course, controlling breathing is one thing that people who meditate have a lot of trouble with. I've heard people ask questions like, should I be controlling it? Should I just let it go? There's all sorts of questions surrounding that, which are good, fair enough questions. And these are things that I struggled with at the time as well. And yeah, all of a sudden, all of this went away after my experience. And I remember sitting there in perfect clarity, not even consciously breathing. Everything was happening. And the rest of my musculature was extremely relaxed. And there was just this very specific part of my lower belly that was inflating and deflating without my input. And this went on. I think it was the midday meditation session. Of course, the session is broken up into several sitting sessions, and the ones in the middle of the day are the longest. And I remember being quite surprised. Like I had this feeling, like, what the fuck is this? Because it had never really happened to me before. I didn't deliberately try to do this. It's just something that happened. And my state of mind was very clear. It was very stable. And after the session, I'm like, what was that? What happened? So that kind of sent me on this intellectual crusade, I would say. The funny thing is about, Western Zen teachers, at least the ones I've had, is very few of them talk about breathing. They don't really give you any instructions, really, other than to sit up straight and to just look at your breathing, which I think is not a good thing. I think you're better off talking about it. But anyway, they know better than me. They're Zen masters, I'm sure. So I looked into the literature, and it sent me on this path of really trying to look at, what breathing is, what physiological impacts it has. Being a physiology nerd, that was the part that interested me. The cultural elements surrounding it, what constitutes a good breath. And yeah, I can tell you now, the literature is extremely rich in other places in the world. And I've done a series, for example, on not an illness, but an umbrella term for a physiological malaise, I guess you could call it, neurasthenia, which is kind of like a 19th century designation for chronic fatigue or depression and all these various things that people feel when they have a depressed physiology. And I obviously investigated it through the prism of Japan, because I was doing Zen, and the Japanese have an entire culture, at least before the Meiji Restoration, it was built around the belly being the center of their being. And of course, that is very interesting. Someone that went through that experience that I did. So I looked into it more deeply. And what's interesting about the Japanese literature in terms of this this malaise called neurasthenia is that they have a lot of literature on it, particularly around, as I say, the Meiji Restoration and just before World War II, where they very rapidly took on Western sensibilities and Western habits. So, for example, working at desks, wearing Western clothes such as belts, sitting in chairs, all the things that we do that they didn't traditionally do. And many of the scientists that were around at the time were interested in why Japanese people were all of a sudden falling prey to these chronic fatigue-like symptoms, like depression, anxiety, all these different things. And the interesting thing they did was they looked at it through the prism of their traditional physiological culture, and looked at what they were doing now or when they modernized. And they're like, well, we've forgotten about our posture, and we've forgotten about belly cultivation, which was apparently a big thing for them culturally. And of course, we all know the thing hara kiri, which is how they stab themselves in the gut. Well, the reason they do that is because the hara, or the region of the abdomen, is the center of their spiritual existence. So, like for us, it's between the eyes, but for them, it's their abdomen, or was their abdomen. So their whole, or lots of their culture was based around the belly, and the energies that apparently emanated from that area, and part of that was breathing into the belly, of course. So these guys, what they did was they prescribed belly breathing in very specific ways with specific techniques, as the antidote to this physiological problem of neurasthenia, which, as I said, was an umbrella term which encapsulates many different symptoms, to quite a lot of success. And a lot of these guys had different ways of doing it slightly, but it all really is based around two fundamental things. The first thing is ensuring that the muscle tonus of the abdomen is strong. So not weak, not without tension, but strong, and able to be effectively coordinated at will. But of course, the other thing that they focused on was not breathing very much. So as they say, they even say 4 times a minute, 4 to 5 times a minute is ideal. It's important to probably say at this point that this is not new at all. So a lot of these products and gimmicks you see on Twitter are trying to make it out as if it's this kind of new thing. This is as old as humanity. In fact, like very interestingly, there's the oldest Chinese medical text called the Yellow Emperor's Classic on Internal Medicine explicitly states that breathing less regularly is critical to all health in the human body. And not only that, but the physician that's quoted in this ancient text, he talks about a breath to heartbeat ratio. So they went into that much detail, which is extremely interesting because that's a lot of this is starting to come out now about how these things influence one another. And that was 2,500 years ago. So it makes you think, like, for how long have human beings been aware of this? It's a blight on Western culture that this is not taken more seriously, because it is absolutely critical, I believe, to a well-functioning human being. So anyway, that's a kind of long-winded way of describing how I started to look at the timing of breath, but also where the breath comes in, the pressure, the thoracic pressure and the interaction with the vascular system. And basically how all these different things fit together, which is basically what I've been doing for a while. And that's what my blog's about. And that's what the course is going to be about. The course is going to be about integrating these very ancient things with various types of body work, with new technology, cringe, and trying to cultivate breathing in a more physiologically beneficial way. So yeah, that was uncalled for, but that's a very general description of how I came to all this, and basically where I think I'm going to go with it. But of course, there's science to it. We can get into that if you want. But
yeah, that's great. A few questions or comments about some of the stuff you said. You were saying how old it must be very old, this idea of breathing as little as possible. Well, not as little as possible, but having very few breaths per minute compared to what people normally do. So if you think even our most ancient ancestors, this is probably a thing that made you survive. Because if you were having to freeze and hide from predators, not panting and breathing, without, probably like everyone thinks of fight or flight, but also there's freeze. That's one way to to not be eaten is to stop moving, to avoid everything. And breathing less is going to make you be able to freeze in position longer. So there's going to be survival benefits of breathing less, not just general health benefits. So it could be extremely old, and more modern. If you think about when people start getting all stimulated in their mind, ideas and things, they tend to start breathing faster.
Yeah.
So back in the day, there was less conceptual stuff going around. You were just doing things physically more. The emphasis was on the physical side of things rather than mental, whereas now it's more on the mental and the physical for most people. So breathing is going to have changed a lot compared to the ancient times. Actually, Paleolithic times. Not just ancient. So obviously ancient, you're talking about other civilizations and they have their own technique. And, every civilization comes up with these techniques somehow.
Yeah.
It makes sense to them. There's the Taoist stuff, there's the shamanistic stuff as well. Really a civilization, but what else did you say? You said about the strong abdomen.
Yeah.
I agree with that, because what I've been working on is having the position of the spine, especially the lower mid spine and the rib cage, in such a way that the abdomen is pulled back and is held strong in position, and you want in such a way that the abdomen's been pulled, stretched just from the mechanical position the person's in. Not by doing it, but just by where you've got the bones in relation to one another. It stretches the elastic structures up down your abdomen. That is a way of making the abdomen strong, which would fit in with the spirit, having your spirit in the abdomen area, an idea of the Japanese. And also, one of the bony spots I work a lot with on the body is the middle of the lumbar spine. And that's basically the back of what they're talking about, isn't it? So that's the same kind of height. But I want it in a certain position and it to be a stable, it's almost it's to be like a stable point from which other things can move from, which makes the abdomen strong just in a mechanical sense. So I could see there being other ways of achieving that another civilization has come up with, or does other things as well, psychological things.
Just quickly on that part, the lumbar spine part. Yeah. So we have, I think, 3 diaphragms in the body. So we have the diaphragm in the chest, the one that everyone knows about. We have a diaphragm in the brain, which I only knew about recently. But we also have a diaphragm in the pelvic region. And this, like all diaphragms, it's a mix of fascia and muscle. And it kind of, I don't know the technical words, but it extends from, I guess, the pubic muscle, sure what the actual word for that is, but it actually extends up. I don't know if you can picture a pelvis, but inside the pelvis up to the lower lumbar spine. And that diaphragm is absolutely critical in cultivating this type of, particularly the Japanese type of tanden breathing, it's called. And yeah, there is an anatomical connection to the lower spine. So yeah, just thought you might be interested to know that. If you look it up, it's worth looking up. It's the pelvic diaphragm. I think it has
amazing. Yeah, it's called the psoas minor.
Yeah,
okay. It joins the lumbar spine to it goes down and it joins in at the pubis bone.
Yeah, that's it.
Everyone knows about the psoas major, everyone talks about this, but it's the psoas minor, and a lot of the anatomists didn't really know what it's for, or just think it's like a sort of remnant, or they don't really know, but it's for this stuff. Yeah. And because they do all the anatomy research on, well, first of all, dead bodies, but second, it's not, it's people who are misusing their mechanisms. So, learn how the correct way of doing something from somebody who's doing it incorrectly, if everybody's doing it incorrectly. And I've had two different teachers that have emphasized the psoas minor in different ways and why it's important. And we should talk about that sometime, because it's it makes a lot of sense for this, and it's interesting you're calling it a diaphragm. There's all of this leads to where
I think it is technically a diaphragm.
Cool. So where the pelvis and the lower, where the pelvis and lumbar spine are relative to one another will affect what happens to the abdomen. Yeah. So from my course, I'm big against the kind of having your lower back curved in, with the chest sticking out and the lower back curved in. Yeah. So that makes the abdomen curve forward. It's like parallel. There's like a parallel curve in your belly. If you look at someone standing side on, even if they're thin, you'll see their belly sticks out, because it's usually because their lower back's curved in, especially if they're like weightlifting and stuff, because they're doing the opposite of slouching all the time, which is to pull back at the top.
Yeah, they get the military posture, right? Just that extremely curved.
That's it. And you get all these guys that are hammering the abs work. Everyone's obsessed with abs, especially when fat guys. That's the first thing they do. They want to sit-ups and all that kind of stuff, planches, whatever. Well, one way to make your belly look smaller is to not have your lower back curved in, and your it's structurally making your belly stick out. It doesn't matter how much fat you have, your belly's going to stick out too. And you'll see this a lot in girls as well, because girls are trying to stick out their ass, so they're like starving themselves so the belly's as small as possible. Actually, they just didn't stick out their ass so much and curved in their lower back quite so much. They wouldn't have, their belly wouldn't be so far forward.
Don't tell them that, Kevin. Don't tell them. I like how they stick out their ass.
I went through a phase of I was trying to put this into a course or into a lesson ages ago, and or I was getting information from one of my students, and I went through a phase. I was trying to take photos of girls on beaches to demonstrate this, but I had to stop doing it because it looks dodgy. But often you would get the best time to see it is if you see two girls on the beach, and because obviously we're wearing beach clothes, so you can see the exact structure. So this is posture perverts lesson 1. If you see them side on, they're always taking photos of each other, obviously. So if you get one that goes out into the water, the other one will take a photo of the one who's in the water, and she'll be holding the phone out. And I don't know why girls do this, guys, that I've seen anyway, is rather than take a step back, they're too close for the photo. So rather than take a step back, they'll lean back at the top. So they're curving the lower back in. They'll lean, they'll try to get the camera further away from the person by leaning back with their hands and their head at the top. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you really see them curving the lower back. So they're doing this extreme Sergeant Major military posture.
Full on. It's full on. It's even beyond
the whole time,
Sergeant Major thing. It's so extreme.
And they're they're leaning back at the waist, at this ridiculous angle backwards, all the while, in the back of their mind, they're trying to look good because they know the people on the beach are looking at them because their asses to the guys on the beach. It's just what's happening. Yeah. And, but they're overstimulated by the camera and they're taking a photo and stuff. Visually they're not looking after the movements that make up the posture, or whatever. So anyway, when you see that, you see all of these things that we're talking about. You'll see the lower rib cage is sticking right out the front, which really makes it difficult to breathe. There's not a strong abdomen at all because you're like the lumbar spine is so far forward. Middle of the lumbar spine is so far moving so far forward. Their top of the pelvis is rolling forward.
In fact, in a way, it's almost like you're pushing it out. Like I'm just thinking of that posture. You're kind of like ballooning it outward, like the muscles, deliberately to try and get in that extreme kind of posture that they get into.
Yes, and
just them on gym machines.
People,
yeah.
Well, I mean, you also guys have their own version of it, just so people know that I'm not a sexist posture pervert.
Equal
so like guys. Yeah. Of course. So guys will do their version is just sticking out the chest, have the big chest. Even young guys especially, you're thinking about you want the big chest to the weights so that you look more powerful. Just look at someone side on and they look less powerful because of puffing out the chest and their lower back's in and they look like this.
Pigeon chested.
What
we call it.
Pouter pigeon, yeah. So anyone listening, look at pouter pigeon. It's like a pigeon that looks like a sergeant major with a puffed up chest. It's hilarious. Yeah. This is what people are doing. This is what men are doing to look tough. Women are doing it to look sexy. And as soon as you see it and you understand the mechanisms, you can't ever think it looks tough or sexy again.
Yeah, I agree.
You can't unsee it once you've seen it. It's one of those things. Yeah. But so anyway, to take it back to breathing, this is obviously affecting your breathing because the mechanisms for breathing are inside the structure. So how could it be otherwise than your breathing is affected based on the shape of your torso? Has to be.
Yeah, totally.
So if it's affected by different shapes, there must be logically some shapes are better for your breathing than other shapes.
Yeah,
there must be logically some exercises that take you closer to some shapes which are better or worse for your breathing. So all of these things are connected. So let's go 100%. Back to what I'm saying about learning in different ways and different techniques at the same time, is you can patch these things together and go, okay, so I'm learning this technique from this guy, but this is an error, the way they're teaching this thing here. This one part of it, I'm actually going to change it slightly because I've learned this other thing in another place. Yeah. And I'm going to experiment with that, see if it works a little bit better doing it that way. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it clashes with, you have to just be a self-experimenter. And then,
you
have to actually be interested in the work to do that. You can't just pick and mix. You can't just grab bits of it and then talk about it online to get dopamine and then think you're learning anything. It's
a novelty hit. It
has to be real. You have to be sincere with yourself. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah, if you want to get the result, absolutely. If you don't just want a little, as you say, dopamine hit. But yeah, no, it does. What I've tried to explain to a lot of these guys is that, so with a lot of the pigeon-chested bodybuilder types, like look at my muscles, I'm a picture of Greek health and vitality or whatever they fucking talk about. So part of the problem with that posture is, and I know this because I go to the gym, so I'm a victim of this. This is how I know, is you hold your chest still because you're trying to fucking pump everything up all the time, right? Like, so you're sitting there and you just, you know, everything's tight and fucking like there's lots of blood and like, you know, you feel muscular. It's a feeling of being muscular. The problem is that actually, I think it comes from the medical profession as well. So one of the biggest misnomers about breathing is that it's just gaseous exchange, which it's absolutely not. Breathing is the central fulcrum in many ways, one of the central fulcrums in basically how blood is moved around the body. Which we typically think is the heart does this, but the heart, you know, the more I find out, I think the best way to describe a heart is kind of like a facilitator. But the thing that should be doing the work is the thoracic cavity. So as you say, the abdomen, the chest, the extent to which you're able to expand and contract that, how deeply you can do that, determines the effectiveness of how the blood is pushed around the vascular tree in the body. And it actually also determines how healthy your heart rate variability is. And we can get into that a little bit later. So if you do bodybuilding and you're just putting tons of tension into the chest, a lot of tension into the abs that you can't easily release, probably tension into the shoulders, traps, all those different things, in some way you're restricting the ability of your body to increase the pressure in the thoracic cavity, which is the thing that really pushes the blood around the body effectively. And the thing is, you can do a session where you try to make this better, but that doesn't really matter because your health is going to be determined by how consistently you're in a state of not having that happen. So I could sit down with a really thick set bodybuilder and go, okay, let's do a session. We'll do these various body exercises. We'll try to loosen up different parts of your musculature in your chest and your abdomen. But they're going to go away from the thing. And because they're so intent on looking tough and looking like they're going to bash everyone up or looking vital or whatever people say, that actually most of the time that they're alive, they're not going to be increasing or having enough pressure in the thoracic cavity or having the capacity to increase the pressure in the thoracic cavity to push the blood around the body. And the heart, when you don't have that ability, the heart is the thing that has to do all the work, right? So when your thoracic cavity and the pressure, so when you breathe in, it's drawing all the blood in, and you breathe out, and it's pushing all the blood out into the capillary tree. That's what's meant to be happening. But with most people, so if you breathe very shallow, and a bodybuilder is going to breathe shallow because he's sitting there trying to show everyone that he's superior, that your heart then does all the work. So your heart is trying to push blood around the system sufficiently to enable you to survive. So your heart rate variability is dog shit because it's just sitting there going like da-dong, 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 just trying to push fucking blood around because you're so tense in your chest that you're not helping it do its job. Good heart rate variability, and I can confirm this because I've seen it, you can change it like that. You can change it so quickly just by increasing the depth and the pacing, lowering the pacing of the breath. And it just changes almost instantly. The interesting thing about heart rate variability is that it's associated with all-cause mortality. So the better it is, the higher it is, the less likely you are to die. Whereas if it's fucked and your heart is doing all the work, then you're brown bread pretty early on. Like you're going to die fairly soon, which totally makes sense because the more you look into the literature, you understand that, as you were saying, all these systems are completely connected with one another. They're all the same thing. It's like this big process that's meant to happen in a certain way. So the bodybuilder, quite literally, is not vital. Quite literally. So I'm not saying that has to be the case, but the modern conception of what healthy is in the bodybuilder is not healthy. But then again, hardly anyone is because they're not looking at this kind of thing. And in fact, actually your average physiologist or scientist still doesn't acknowledge that breathing is not just about gaseous exchange. It's also about vascular health. So just on that, so several of my teachers that I've worked with, they, and I kind of believe their thinking is it, pardon me, frog in my throat. So most diseases like, for example, hypertension, high blood pressure, diseases like even Alzheimer's. I don't know if you saw that recently, but they actually think that it's a vascular problem. It's a vascular problem in the brain. this can all be attenuated by increasing or having the ability to increase thoracic pressure and pushing blood around the body more effectively, more often, which seems so obvious, doesn't it? But if everyone's going around breathing 16 times a fucking minute, it's no wonder we fucking drop dead of all these diseases, because there's not enough blood being pushed around. It's no wonder we have heart attacks. It's no wonder we're anxious. It's no wonder, we have a whole retinue of problems, which can so easily be attenuated or corrected just by introducing a new habit into your body, which can be done. So, yeah, the bodybuilder, the top heavy, sucking in the gut all the time, the immobile chest, the immobile gut, lots of muscle tissue. Like that's a recipe for fucking dying young. Like, it's terrible. And it looks stupid, actually. So it's interesting you say, you were saying, you have that military way of holding your body with a curved spine. Yeah, it's the same with breathing. So if you see, the bodybuilder with the suitcases walking around like he's going to bash everyone, which, you and me both know he can't do that, actually. Like, so if you do martial arts, you can easily fuck a motherfucker like that up. But it's going to kill him early. He's going to have a shit life. He's probably anxious. He's in a constantly stimulated sympathetic state. So internally, if he's walking around like that, he's showing you with his body. He's showing you his state with his body, that he's overstimulated, he's anxious, aggressive, and he's in a fight or flight response. It meant, like, quite literally. So anyway, yeah, I agree. It's not vital. It's not healthy, and it's kind of stupid. It's kind of self-defeating. I do think that there's a way to integrate having muscle with this, though. I don't think it necessarily has to be like you're sitting there fucking holding yourself, like just going, like walking around like, I'm not gonna fucking breathe. I'm just fucking so strong, and I've got heaps of testosterone. I don't think you need it doesn't. It's not like a binary. So I think you can kind of integrate different things. But having said that, I actually think that the part of the human being that should be more muscular probably is the back. I actually think the chest should be less muscular. There should be tone. There should be tonus, but I don't think it should be built up, like hugely built up.
Yeah, I'm all about the back. It's like I'm much more interested in wide across the back, maximum width that you can get across the back and back of the shoulders.
So how do you do that? Like, what is your suggestion?
What you don't do is stand up straight with your shoulders back, because if you pull your shoulders back, look at someone from behind who's pulling their shoulders back, you'll see that their shoulder blades are coming closer together. They're narrowing their back, basically. So that pulling back your shoulders, narrowing the back go together. A lot of this is, a lot of people don't notice this stuff because we don't look at ourselves side on.
Yeah.
Obviously. You're not looking at yourself side on. You're looking at yourself in the mirror, face on, or in pictures of yourself, usually face on. Other people, it's usually how you're seeing them, or you're looking at them like this. So we're never thinking about the things I'm talking about, what things look like from the side. Because in my, what I teach is all like working with images from the side all the time.
Yeah, it is.
That's so the first thing is to learn to look at yourself like that. It's quite shocking the first time you do it. I mean, like, I often get someone to, a first lesson, somebody will say, okay, show me what you do to make your posture better, what you normally do, stand up straight with your shoulders back, or whatever it is you do. You do to, whatever it is you do to make yourself feel like you're fixing your posture. And then I do it side on, then I screen record live there and then I play it back to them. And say they've never seen it before. Most people haven't thought to look.
I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, exactly.
I couldn't. I'm like, it's fucked up, man. Look at this. Look at this guy.
It was worse for me. I was doing movement. I was teaching people movement professionally, and I hadn't really looked at myself like that. I was just going by the feeling. It felt great. So I teach them to feel good. It was like it's embarrassing now to think about it. But anyway, this is how you learn. So You know, like a lot of the stuff I've learned is from Matthias Alexander, who his early stuff, not what later became Alexander technique, is different. But in the early days, what he taught himself was in front of he had 3 mirrors, you know, like angled so you can see yourself from the back and the side, how you actually look. You know, like the same ways you'll get in changing rooms in a clothes shop. So you can see yourself the different angles. So that's how he did it, you know, because he was where he'd learned it from. That's one of the things they taught people to use mirrors. So this is like kind of modern technologies makes this possible. Mirrors, good mirrors, multiple mirrors, you know, that's not.
Yeah. Drones. I've used a drone to take footage of me. Like I told you that, right? But that's really good because that really gives you like this view of yourself. Like I've never seen myself like that. Of course you don't. You can't see yourself as like a disembodied being. So, but it's shocking. I remember looking at myself for the first time going, fucking goddamn, this is horrifying. I don't know what it is, but it's just
that's the
confronting.
With some power, the gift give us to see ourselves as others see us. We have that power, and you can actually see yourself more accurately than other people will see you because they don't really know. They look at this stuff until it's pointed out, then it's obvious. so yeah, that's the first thing for fixing these things is seeing yourself, learning to see yourself in a new way, and that helps you stop trusting your feeling of what you're doing, thinking what you're doing is what you're actually doing, thinking the feeling of what you're doing is what you're actually doing, because the video will show you something else often.
Yeah, that's for sure.
You think you're doing things that are making you taller. You look at yourself. You actually, technically, you can draw little diagrams. You make yourself short, like objective. You can see it. You've shortened yourself. You curved your lower back in. You bend something in the middle. It gets the two ends get closer together. You're doing that. So, like, this is just objective. You can see it with modern technology.
Yeah.
So when people say technology is the problem with all these things, yes, but it's also a solution. It's not the cause of it. It just accelerates things. We're just doing what we're doing.
Technology is brilliant, by the way. It's fucking fantastic. If you use it properly, it's incredible.
Exactly.
No faith required. Zero faith. You just see it.
Yeah,
see it happening.
It's just like it's just one of those things. It's ambiguous. It's ambivalent. It's just one way or the other. It's like there's no escaping it now. And you can go off into the woods and have no technology, but you still have concepts in your mind in language, which is a type of technology. You still have, like all these mental models that are technologies. You have all these, your arm, it's a technology for doing things, it's a means to an end for doing things. In one sense, not just that, but so we're kind of this technology all the way down. So you have to use it, and there's pros and cons. So there's pros and cons of one type of arm is good for up in the trees, another type of arm better on the ground. Depends.
Yeah.
So there's no good. It's not a case of good or bad. It's better or worse.
Yeah. It's as long as you
went to outer space, we want it different. The way bodies work now is not ideal for outer space with no gravity. So the concept now is you try and take the gravity to space. You try and you try and make things more. You have them doing their exercise bikes and all that stuff. Try and make them so they don't have all the muscle. They don't waste away and stuff like that because they're not. You're not suited to zero gravity. The future will be genetic modification where you don't need the gravity. You have you don't need legs. You need 4 arms. Is more useful in a spaceship than 2 legs is. Better to have 4 arms. You can work all your fucking tools and gadgets and the buttons. So that is the only viable future for proper space travel in my view. 4 arms.
Yeah. But, sort of a really offensive joke that I probably shouldn't say online, but it's really good. But anyway, sorry. keep going. Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, so these things, it's technology good bad. It's either or. So for my point of view is, well, your posture is getting worse because you're online watching all these videos, or whatever.
Yeah.
So you'd be as well using online video technology to make your posture better again. You're doing it anyway. So that's the way I deal with that. And you have obviously used various devices for measuring breathing, so you have an objective sense as well as your subjective point of view. If you had someone subjectively tell you how often they breathe, they would get it wrong. You measure them, or somebody or another person monitors it, or you give them a method for monitoring it. These are technologies. If you want to check someone's pulse, the whole idea of you just put your finger on this part of their body and then you count, you time, 10 seconds and how many in 10 seconds, or whatever it is, 20 seconds multiplied by whatever, whatever way you tell them to do it, that's the technology. You've just taught them a method. This is not something an animal comes up with.
No.
So, this is, so just to go, one last thing is we were talking about control earlier, and should you just are you controlling your breathing or letting it happen? I find that there's problems around the word control. I use the word control. I like it, but I don't mean it necessarily the way people assume it. So if I say about conscious control, that doesn't mean that you're consciously controlling every single thing in every single moment. You're like, I'm breathing, I'm doing this, I'm breathing, I'm moving my hand, I'm breathing. None of that. I don't mean that. Conscious control of that would be, it's not working the way it is. or I'm having problems the way it is. I've heard about this technique that it will improve it. They'll apply this technique. That's conscious. You're consciously deciding to do. You're making a decision to do that. Then you implement the technique, and then maybe now it's starting to quote do it by itself. And now you can leave that, but you have ways of monitoring it to check that it's still working and stuff. So to me, that is all conscious control. It doesn't mean you're every moment thinking of every single breath. That's just stupid. So like all these things are like that. So to take conscious control of your physiology is like that. It's you're making interventions where and when you need to, and you're using your mind to educate your body. I heard some people talking about this the other day on Twitter, is just trusting your body and stuff. I just think that's just
nonsense.
Anti-evolutionary
nonsense.
Totally, it's just stupid. I get why they say it, because people have all these ideas, concepts in their head, and so they're wanting to, they're not a disembodied person. I understand all that, but don't just go the other way. It's just stupid. So your body won't do anything useful. It won't take the easiest route all the time. You listen to your body.
It's got its homeostasis.
Body decide.
Sorry,
exactly.
you go.
And a lot of the time they're not listening to the body. Actually, it's just a different set of concepts in their head.
They're listening to an ideology. Yeah, an ideology.
Yeah, they're listening to the concepts of allowing your body.
We was perfect in the jungle, man. It's just fucking another fucking level of just thinking something.
I mean, on that note, if you go to if you read some of the stuff about hunter-gatherers and stuff, they're deep in concepts. They're a different way of coming up with concepts. They're just very different types of concepts and networks of concepts that include things that Western culture doesn't normally include anymore. It's not that they're just living in the moment and going by sensations and feelings. They really aren't. They have all the animistic concepts. They have they have all these rules that they have about what you should do in certain places and stuff, because that's how you survive. What things go together, what things go on. It's not at all this the way the Westerners think of these people. They're just listening to their body all the time. That's just all nonsense. For starters, they're listening to plants telling them which plants to put together, or
which can be fun.
So I mean, that doesn't sound like your body. So
if it's drugs, it can be fun. So I put it this way. So I agree with the conscious concept thing, but or the conscious control, thing. And this is part of what's driving me to do the work is I feel like all the traditions and at least most of the work I've come across, they complicate it unnecessarily. Like what you're trying to do is something that's very, very basic in many ways. So at least with the breathing. So we've for example, we've established that breathing is not just about exchanging gases. It's also about pushing blood throughout the body. And when you do this, it has impacts on the nervous system. So you have the autonomic nervous system, which of course forms a part of the central nervous system, and much of what the autonomic nervous system is, for people that don't understand, these are things autonomic, automatic. So things that are controlling parts of your body that are very much out of your conscious purview, that just kind of happens. So your digestion, various other bodily functions like that. So it is possible, therefore, to so you have another element that scientists call the somatic nervous system, which is the part that they describe the part that we use to exercise conscious control over our body. So that's called the somatic nervous system. And all these things form part of the general label and concept that they call the central nervous system. So within the autonomic nervous system, there is some degree of conscious control, and I absolutely hate this word. So hacking. Hacking. I fucking hate that, because of Ben Greenfield and people they're just fucking we're just going to hack this shit. It's not so much that, it's that breathing for most people is quite automatic. It's quite automatic. And the way that we breathe, just because of circumstance, being one of the central fulcrums of all these nervous systems and how they're interacting, the blood flow, the arterial pressure, the pressures in the heart. One way that you can hack into this is just by short-circuiting the whole process and just slowing down one of the fundamental central fulcrums, which is breathing. So all you're doing is you breathe slower, and then all the other functionality based on the thing on the breath, which is the blood flow, the different gas exchange, they change as well. And therefore, by doing that thing, you're exercising indirectly some degree of control over the entire nervous system and the state that it's in, taking it from usually a highly stimulated sympathetic state to a very, to a more parasympathetic bias, or in a best case, a balance between the two things, which is really what you want. You want a balance. You don't want one way or the other, usually. So in terms of conscious control, so it's true, as you say, you are exercising conscious control, but part of that is also learning the unconscious habit consciously. And this is the monotonous, boring part that no one wants to do, where you have to sit down for 30 or 40 minutes a day and literally breathe slower in a disciplined session. And if you do that it doesn't even fucking take that long. If you do that for 1 or 2 months, like, you can literally change the way that you breathe unconsciously through only consciously exercising 20 to 30 minutes a day. So for myself, for example, it took a month, and I just retrained myself with a very simple metronome. I retrained myself to 5 breaths a minute. And what's interesting is my entire experience changed just with this one simple trick. it literally was that easy, but it is boring. It's fucking boring. It's not sexy. There's no gods or weird shit going on. There's no energy fucking blowing out of your eyeballs. There's nothing weird going on. You're just consciously staying present, exercising that breath reflex in the proper way, doing it X amount of times a minute for 30 minutes a day. And then you're trying to bring that into your everyday experience when you're in a relatively relaxed state. Obviously not when you're running around or doing something active. But it is actually surprising then how quickly you can make that a habit. It does happen surprisingly quickly. And although that is not the entirety of the work that I'm going for, because the devil is in the detail, as I say, but it is nevertheless something that the average person can derive great benefit from. And I've seen lots of people have amazing benefits just from training themselves to slow down their breath. But yeah, so back to the question of conscious versus unconscious. You do sessions where you're doing something consciously, and if you do it enough every day, then it becomes unconscious. And it's really that simple. And I wish my fucking Zen teachers had just had the knowledge to have to explain that to you. So if you do it every day, do the same thing every day, then it becomes a habit and your body will start doing it. It's really that easy in many ways. That's how I determine what's conscious versus what's unconscious. But of course, there's moments when you're going to be agitated or anxious in a situation that you don't like, where you can then consciously employ the technique. That's true as well. But you know, over time, you can bring this thing into just the way you are. It becomes automatic and autonomic. So I just thought I'd say that. That's what I think about it.
Right, yeah. And then you can part of a good technique or method would be a way of monitoring yourself so that you keep an eye on it, that it is functioning the way you want it to function, and you top it up, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, there are ways to do it. Yeah, there are ways.
So,
to do
it's not a case of, it's not simply set and forget. You don't just learn it once and it's done forever, but you definitely you're retraining parts of you to operate in a different way.
Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't have done it by itself without you consciously making a decision, consciously making yourself do a technique when you probably would have preferred to do something else. You're doing something that was uncomfortable or weird or strange or just boring. And then eventually it starts happening by itself. Doesn't mean you can trust it forever. The mistake people make, they're hunting for when can I forget about this and move on to the next thing. Not quite like that.
No.
But the other thing is, once some of it's happening by itself and you're changing the kind of deeper systems, it frees up your current, your working memory conscious mind, whatever's in your head right now in the moment, to think about other stuff. So you can practice it in other situations, or you can add in more technique, or you can make it more complex. It depends what you're working on. So
because you're being lived by these things, and then when you take the decision to take conscious control and to train them in some other way, so then they benefit you, then you're using them. But most people are being dictated to by their physiology. So I think that's an important point that you're raising. So it's like this work, if people are confused, is about flipping the script. So it's like, okay, well, I'm now going to use these techniques to then exercise, quote unquote, control over them, because I want to free up the energy that's currently being used by them, and I want to integrate it or use it for different things, which is a critical part of it. And it's particularly critical with the breathing, because if you are constantly excited, so I think I did this experiment in an essay, and you're constantly agitated, constantly reactive, and then you simply just slow down your breathing for a while. So you do that for 20 minutes, and then you notice the difference in the conscious or the character of your conscious experience. Without a doubt, you will notice that you have far more capacity to not react, first of all, but then to go and do kind of whatever you feel like you need to do to consciously direct yourself into a certain activity. If you're constantly in a sympathetic state, so just a very agitated, reactive state, your body is reacting to things. Like, that is the nature of your conscious experience. You don't have any bandwidth for anything else. So if you want to be non-reactive or less reactive, then of course it makes sense to put the brakes on that process. So anything you can do to not be that way, for example, not go on Twitter and argue with people you don't even know, or in arguments that no one will remember in 5 minutes time, let alone 100 years, let alone, in your lifetime. If you don't want to exist in that way and you want to be effective in your life, then you can do that by just slowing down your breathing. Take 20 minutes, slow it down. You free up all that energy that was being unconsciously expended on things that you didn't really have any control over. And then you're free to then go and use that on things that you want to use it on. And in many ways, this is the crux of the Hyatt work, the Reich work, the posture work that you're doing. All these things are doing the same thing inherently. They're taking the reactivity away. They're taking the expenditure of energy in things that you're not dictating terms for, I guess. I'm just trying to think of the best way to put it. And then you're freeing up that energy, and then you can then go and use it how you consciously want to direct it, which is not possible for most people most of the time, because they're just always reacting.
That's an analogy. People don't like being most a lot of people don't like it being at a job anyway. And one of the things they hate in their work most is being constantly told to do these things that they don't want to do, often in a stupid way that they know there'd be a better way to do them, but this is the way they get done, so you have to do them that way. And they're constantly reacting to these orders from other people that they think are stupid or pointless or annoying, and they just don't want to do it. Well, that's exactly the same thing is happening with the mechanisms of your body for most people. You're just you're just a victim of what they want to do.
Constantly.
You're just having to go by the breathing that is happening by itself dysfunctionally now. You're just going by the posture that's happening by itself dysfunctionally now. You have all these other habits
and the tension. You're holding the tension, right? So you're sitting there like,
and you're a victim of it.
Yeah.
You don't think about the tension. What you're thinking about is you're worrying about stuff in your head. You're stuck in these words in your head, but actually it's muscle tension driving that. In many cases, that will lose the muscle tension, the excess tension, and those thoughts just stop. Often, you can release a lot of excess muscle tension. You'll find you just have less internal dialogue. That's the automated internal dialogue. You now have free space to actually think about things conceptually and do real thinking because there's less noise in your head.
Yeah.
Like you're making a space, you're being less of a victim. Your habits sounds too kind of glib, or it's just your habits, but in a way it is. Yeah, you just have a certain breathing habits, you have a certain thinking habits, you have certain emotional habits, all these things that are intertwined. But what you're aware of is usually the surface level or the symptoms of these things, never the cause.
Yeah.
Like you don't see the direct cause. So the first thing you do is look for solutions to the symptoms, not the cause.
Yeah.
So, I'm like distracted. So or like, or you feel bad, so you drink alcohol to get rid of the bad feeling.
Well, I'm doing that right now, just in case you couldn't tell.
I have done it many times.
A rough week, but anyway, continue.
Well, I mean, I'm the same. Everyone does these things. Not that I'm against doing these things like that, but you know what I mean. So you have some kind of physical issue. You try and your shoulders are stiff, so you try to find some therapist to work directly on your shoulder. But actually, from my point of view, your shoulder's probably stiff because of where you're putting your pelvis and lumbar spine, but you didn't think about that because the pain is in your shoulder. So you immediately go to the shoulder. That's one example. I've had guys change the way that they stand and the positions and angles of the legs and pelvis and things, and even the angle of the feet and the heel, where the weight is going on the heel, things like that, and the shoulder pain has gone away.
God damn, the feet thing is weird. That's so weird. Like I just tried it the other day. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm so out of alignment.
Yeah, it's impossible to do right the first time though. There's so many things have to go in with it. It's a really hard thing to teach. If I teach that one-to-one, then I'm going back and forward to that all the time and trying to widen it into different things. It's really hard. Like as I was saying earlier, in the context of a online course, you have to kind of go step by step and put it in the same way for everyone. It's not ideal. So, but people want courses. So, forgot what I was ranting about.
Yeah, no, yeah, and this is why I think we all need to be careful of language and talking, and the feeling of superiority that we like to have when we have different thoughts or thoughts that we think are different or special or better or whatever, because there's a whole physiological element to thinking, and it really only takes a session of a certain kind of thing, yoga, whatever, where you realize that thoughts are very much dependent on the state of the body at the time. I think we all know that, right? We all know that, but very few of us act in that way. And for people, at least people who are involved in our space, I honestly think that the further away you can get from theorizing too much and having a hard on for theories and falsely painting yourself as superior to other people, the better, because I just feel like there's so much coping that goes on with language and words and arguments and all these different things that we do as humans. And we were talking about this the other day, and I don't want to go over it again, but it's if your words are not connected to some tangible action, then it's a tenuous thing to build superiority on that. For me, superiority is your ability to execute the actions that you determine in time and space, and how well you do that. I feel like novel distractions like social media and the internet, that can be very dangerous, because they can, first of all, they distract you away from being superior, but they can help you feel superior when you're not superior. And in this kind of work, that's not a good thing. I think that the more you can turn that off, the more you can just get in tune with your body and what's going on, and even noticing your thinking, like what's happening in my head right now, but taking a step back and just watching what's going on, and looking at yourself not so much like you're a superior organism, but looking at yourself as a test subject is going to yield more fruitful results ultimately than reading a book and just thinking that you're better than other people. The real danger with social media, because of its tribalism, because of its novelty, because of its ability to distract you, is that it's going to give you a false sense that something's happening when it isn't, a false sense of differentiation, which, even if you have quite pedestrian aims, it could just be that I want to be rich, or it could be that I want to be the next Napoleon, or whatever's going on. It's kryptonite for that. It's kryptonite for that. It's kryptonite for this work as well. So I'd like to see, I try to do this myself as an addict, a de-emphasis on wording and thoughting and the death spirals that it can lead to. Because, yeah, a lot of this conscious body work is kind of the opposite thing. You're trying to do the opposite thing. So it's something to keep in mind. I think we've gone over that a couple of times in this conversation.
What you're saying there about the words and stuff, it's connected to the breathing issues as well. Because
Totally.
we think of thinking and breathing as separate things. But really, thinking is words in your head. Like most, the type of thinking that most people are doing, most people think about when we're talking about thinking, is, it's verbalizing in your mind, or generating pictures in your mind, maybe. But even if you're generating pictures that are associated with words and concepts, just may not be as conscious for the person thinking them. But anyway, the point is, you're using the same mechanisms to thoughts in your head come from words out loud first. You don't think the word and then start speaking it. You, in the development, you're hearing words from outside you first, and then you're making noises, and then then that becomes internalized. The verbalization just becomes silent, and we just call it thinking now, because you're just not saying it out loud. So you've gone through a physical process. I mean, what is talking it's breathing. It's a form of breathing. The talking is. So, like, you're using your breath in a certain way. So by the time you're able to think, you've already changed your breathing mechanisms as a, quote, natural creature. Now, obviously, it's natural for humans to speak. If you do this in a good way or a bad way, it's going to affect your breathing. So you've already changed your breathing and probably became a victim of your breathing just by virtue of learning to speak in the way you've learned to speak, and those habits. And then how you, all the types of verbalizing you're doing, which includes writing a tweet silently in your own mind. breathing is involved in this, your posture is involved in this.
This is going to change it all. This one tweet.
this is
going
the
to fucking
one.
save the motherfucking day.
All the time now, I just keep thinking of that of the Fight Club meme where he's, in the airplane. How's being smart?
How's that working out for you?
And I'm just changing that for whatever it is. How's that great political comeback? You just they're working out. You've been doing this for weeks now.
Yeah.
How's it working out?
Sure showed them.
Like eventually you realize this stuff it just goes nowhere. Most of the time, and again, but the things are so connected. You're getting stimulated and wound up emotionally about the issue. So they tweet about it, so they're still in the words. This has affected their breathing. They probably, if you were measuring them, you see the breath rate change as they're doing this, and then they're up and down. You would see if you measure them, probably the times their tension was up, was peaking during the day, was the times you see them going to the Twitter and doing lots of tweets. It's really just a tension release thing, or maybe they have too much gas. All these things are so connected that we're not even aware of until you start getting rid of them by doing some kind of technique, which would be the things that we talk about. And one of the things I really liked about Hyatt's Undoing work was the very basic first thing in the book, Undoing Yourself book, was the noticing the connection between consciousness and tension. One of the early methods of experimenting, kind of making noises, and you realise that you're thinking and the tension around that mouth in the throat. The connection between them, because that was one point I hadn't noticed. I think a lot of people are still at that stage. I mean, I just take it for granted now. I noticed that when I was 20 reading that book, and then it's just normal now. And I've been doing all other kinds of work based on that. But a lot of people haven't had that realization, and they seem like separate things. So this is all just kind of lumped under mind-body split, which again is very intellectual sounding. But really, it's right here, right now. It's how you're doing it now, thinking, listening to this, whatever thing you're doing, whatever way you're saying, however you're breathing, you're doing it. It's always present, even if you're not focusing on that particular thing right now because you're distracted with some emotion.
And there's tangible, real world consequences as well. So, for example, with heart rate variability. So as I said, like I'd measure myself and I measured people. So when you're in an excited state, your heart rate variability is very poor. So it's all the pressure's on your heart, which makes sense because you're sitting there, you're doing the bodybuilder pose. You're like, there's no pressure in your rib cage, in the thoracic area. So your heart's doing all the work. So you're in an extremely excitable, sympathetic state. Stress hormones, all these different things going on that are just detrimental. That if you're constantly living in that state, it's not a good thing. So when you're looking at the internet, that's kind of the state you're in. So you're hunched over, you're not breathing much. So people who are even listening to this now, you're just sitting there, and just take a moment to notice what's going on with your body, like literally how deep are you breathing? Next time you go onto Twitter, just notice it. Just take a moment to just go, okay, here I am. This is what's going on with my body. So my rib cage is barely moving. My state of mind is negative because I've just seen people beating each other up, whatever hopelessness you're indulging in. And even if you're thinking like you're making an esoteric vitality post, just even then, look at your body posture, look at your breath, look at all your like literal vital signs. Just take stock of them every time you do it. And I can say for sure that if you're hunched over, you're not breathing deeply and regularly, and you don't have any of these habits, that first of all, you're not vital. But second of all, your heart rate variability, which is the thing we were talking about before, as being the best non-invasive metric of autonomic emphasis. Heart rate variability, or low heart rate variability, is associated with everything bad in the world. So it's really in fashion at the moment, because athletes are using it to determine if they're overtrained. People are using it to measure, just generally in what state of health people are in. But lower heart rate variability, which is a negative, is associated with just all-cause mortality. And in particular, and this ties into what we're talking about here tonight, cardiovascular events, heart attacks, hypertension, all these different things. So when you're looking at the screen passively, just sitting there, just looking at it, looking at this stressful stimuli constantly, and you think you're fighting this great battle against the forces of evil, all you're doing is, first of all, you're distracted. So when you could be taking tangible action on the thing that you apparently care about, you're not doing that. You're just sitting there looking at fucking flashes of light on a screen. But also your literal physiology is shit. You're putting it in a state of stress. You're putting it in a state that literally, if you're like that all the time, chances are you're going to die earlier than other people, because nothing is functioning like it should do in a vital being. And this is what I just struggle to get across this message to people. It's a really important message. You can't be vital just with pictures and words and reading. Vitality is a function of your entire body and the way it's integrated and the way it's work and the way it works. And being an internet addict, it's not going to cut it. It just won't cut it. And I used to be more sympathetic towards this kind of activity. And I'm not saying the internet's bad, because it has given me information that is incredible. But I honestly think that you really want to be careful about how much you use it. And you want to be careful about when you're using it. You want to be consciously using it. So not just sitting there just going, fucking this motherfucker said the wrong thing. You almost want to be sitting there and almost doing like a bodywork session while you're using it. So you can attenuate the negative impacts of what it's doing to you, because it's not good. And if you're particularly a young guy, like, man, the fucking young guys squandering their lives on this shit. It is heartbreaking, because, a lot of them are very intelligent. A lot of them, if they just would focus on something good, and if they could just imbibe even a small amount of what is being said here, it would be really good for them. And I hope they do it, because you're not going to win the battle online. I'm sorry. It's not how it works. I'm telling you, that's not how it works. So
this is like a problem we said earlier about teaching the kind of things we're teaching, which are anti-online destructive.
Yeah. But just quickly on that, they make it out as if we're the evil guys, like we're trying to pull them away from the great battle, right? But that's not what's going on. I'm trying to say the great battle's over there, and also with your and how effectively you can engage in that is also determined by how effectively you can control your body. And what you're doing now is you're trying to get away from that. You're doing something other than what you apparently want to do. I mean,
if the internet collapsed right now, if it collapsed, you had no access to it, what would you be left with? Is anything different? Suddenly you're just a body in a place now with the people around you. Has anything changed at all from what it would have been if you'd never been on it? A lot of people, the answer is no. They just had some intellectual experiences. saw some pictures, read some words of it. You know, very, anyway, but like, I don't want to, sound like we're Luddites or stopping people doing things. It's the opposite. How you go from, it's just the thing about, you have a tool and you're using the tool, and then the tool takes over and the tool is using you. That's the situation people get all the time. It seems to be that's the ambivalent nature of technology. You just, if you don't maintain a strong, consciously directed sense of self, you'll just get pulled into things. And it's kind of normal to a certain extent, but nothing will change. Nothing change.
Nothing will. That's the thing. Yeah. And not only that, it won't change, but it's also bad for you. It's actually worse for you than just a normal person walking around doing normal things. But you're sitting there thinking you're better. So you think you're better. But when we look at the evidence, so if we got our drone out and we followed the person around and we're like, let's follow, like watching a zebra or something, there's no difference, really. They've probably got, probably a worse physiology. They sit hunched over a light on a screen.
You get
what are you doing?
Somebody's presenting themselves in a certain way online, and then they get doxxed or whatever, and then people see them and they're either like hypocritical or they're the opposite of the way they present it. So everyone's knows this. What you really want to do is you want to dox yourself. You want to see what you're really like yourself that you hadn't noticed. Yeah. So like, you think you're one way, so you have this mentalist image of you and up changing the world and doing all stuff online. And then if you get the drone out and record yourself and see yourself, you're like, holy shit, I'm not who I thought I was at all. I had this deluded version of myself. Delusions of grandeur, or you just thought you were a different way.
Messiah complex.
You look differently. So you've got all these things. So then you see what you're really like, and there's the discrepancy between your kind of the image, your avatar you'd invented of yourself with the real, a more real version of yourself. And then also you use that to actually improve your situation or things, or to create something.
That's the point. So it's disempowering to think you're better. And that seems so obvious. Seems like a basic bitch kind of thing to say, but you got to be careful of the internet. You do. Like, it's powerful. Like, it's a powerful distraction. And if people read that book by Adam Gazzaley, they'll understand what it's doing. It's extremely powerful. And when people are selling you a sense of superiority, that you should be careful of that, because chances are probably not. So
well, it's a good sign of psychological health is how you react to people and things that are superior to you in some specific way. So if somebody is better at you, there's something that you pride your identity on and it's important to you, and then somebody's better than you, how do you react? Do you go, or do you admire the person? Do you admire them? Do you hero worship them, or do you hate them and despise them and come up with all these reasons why they're like a horrible person, but actually it's envy driving it? Or do you have admire them in a kind of logical, self beneficial way? Oh, that guy's really good at that. I need to do more of that. It's better than what I'm currently doing. And you'll find that a lot of these things there's envy behind it. You dislike people because you're envious. This is kind of normal. Takes time to get this out of you, to recognize this in yourself. It's harder to have a drone showing you can't see this. It's not as easy to see as just recording yourself and going, oh, okay, I don't look like
the biggest lightning rod, I think.
There's a lot of energy you're trapped up in envy. So there's the actual envious energy that you would have in yourself anyway. Everyone has to varying degrees. And then you have all these contraptions in your mind to hide the fact that it's envy from you. So there's you have to lie to yourself in one way to cover it up. Oh, it's really this. And then you have to have this other way because part of you knows the truth. So you constantly have all this energy in your mind and also your body, your physiology aimed at hiding these unpleasant truths from yourself because you'll be ashamed of yourself when you realize what's really driving it. It's not clever thoughts. It's just shitty little emotions like everybody else, like normal people. But once you see it, then you start to follow it back, and you have all this extra energy now, and you can use that for useful things.
Yeah.
It's there now in you. You may go through a phase of being ashamed and feeling bad or whatever, but it's fine if you're not wallowing in it, and it's you're doing something with it. You're doing new things while feeling like that. Will then give you that energy will transform into positive and
expansive,
creative energies for you. Yeah. But you have to get that turned out the way by doing something. Otherwise, they'll just turn in on you, and you'll just not so envious. The guy just sitting stewing in his basement, coming out with all these about angry tweets and all that, or he has a shitty public job with his public Twitter profile, and then he has this alt account where he's just like a dick to everybody. Like play it in. I mean, the tons of the tons of those people. There's nowhere near as many people on Twitter as people think. It's lots of people with two accounts, the official one and the dick account.
Absolutely.
I would like to know the stats on this, but I bet it's shocking. And all of these techniques that we talk about here and we talk about today are ways of accessing this, because you can't simply think your way into this stuff. You have to be able that kind of flow back and forward between conceptual stuff and then physiological stuff and then back, and then things will begin to change between the two. It's kind of like you're kind of always having to bridge the gap between your psychology and physiology. Not that those two things are really separate, but and learning to just try to be honest with yourself. That's the hardest thing. The hardest thing by far is to be honest with yourself and to see yourself clearly. Even before you start seeing other people clearly, because you really, like you say, I mean, if you're envious about people, as an example, you do a breathing technique and you realize you're not so angry at looking and thinking about that person now. You realize it's kind of a tension-based thing, or it's your own drama that's going on. You'll see that person in a different way, and you might actually start seeing something you can learn from then.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed years ago, somebody who I flipped between not hero worshipping, but like really just admiring, thinking they were great and trying to copy them. I flipped from that to envy and disliking everything about them, and it kind of try to hide it from myself, but more or less.
Anyone in particular?
Envious.
Someone that.
It's a long time ago. It's just like a internet business personality. It's just like a boring, but the fact that I flipped from those two things made me realize, okay, this is not any way conscious or reasoned, my opinions here. It's purely emotionally driven, because how can I flip from opposite to opposite? It's like the way people convert from one political view and they just flip to another one more or less overnight. Well, you don't think these things because there's something else going on if you could just flip like that. Emotionally driven. So it's similar to that. And now I can look at the person or people like that and you can say, okay, they're misguided in these ways. I dislike this, but actually these things they've got right and good. I can learn from them that way. Now you know you're thinking and you're looking at you're seeing the person differently now. Whereas before you're completely blinded and limited in what you can see based on the emotion driving you. And envy is the kind of mixture between kind of, I don't know, like fear and anger and greed kind of all mixed together. I don't know what it is. So like, and those are all like really deep physiological things in your brain.
And expensive. It's an expensive emotion energetically. It's very expensive, right? You pay a lot for envy. It's
the way a lot of people avoid envy or hide it from themselves is the superiority complex. They just think they're already superior. So I don't feel envious because I'm superior. You'll be just abused of that. Start doing things like that. I'm doing other kind of deep physiological work. These things will come up quite early or reasonably early. The surface level, once you get below the surface, these things, all your defense mechanisms, as the psychoanalysts would call them, and these little hidden feelings from yourself will come up, and you'll realize you're just like everybody else. All the people you don't want to be like, you're just like them in many ways. But at least you're now working with it, so in a way you're not just like them because you're obviously doing something about it.
And they're just like you as well.
Yeah, often and then everybody's hiding. I mean, Mr. Riot says that somewhere, doesn't he? Everybody's hiding the same secret you are.
It's a good one.
You know, that they feel inferior, but they're pretending to feel superior. That they're secure. All the things that you're, whatever feelings or things you have that you're embarrassed about, everyone else doesn't do the same.
Yeah.